Good evening. My name is Namit Arora, and I would like to talk about two kinds of values, market values and social values, not in isolation, but in terms of how they impact each other. Now, it's true that markets are good at creating innovative products, raising production, creating jobs. It's also true that markets continue to penetrate more and more areas of our social life. But what are the risks of an excessive market-based thinking? Should we keep the market out of some spheres of social life? For instance, should we raise revenue from rich prisoners by letting them pay to upgrade their prison cells? Should we charge people for the privilege of jumping to the front of airport security lines? To fund our elite institutions like the IITs, should we auction 5% of their seats to the top bidders? Should we have a legal market in human organs for transplants? Many of us intuitively know that when we extend market values to our social practices, it often comes with hidden costs and unintended consequences. Michael Sandel, a philosopher at Harvard, thinks about such topics, and my talk is inspired by this great book. So here is a simple example. I'll let you figure out which of these two situations is becoming more common in middle-class homes. With all the distractions today, love of reading is something few kids cultivate. How do we change this? A school district in Dallas tried a market mechanism. They offered $2 for each book a kid read. So here's an example of a market-based incentive that hopes to achieve positive outcomes. What do you think the outcome was? Kids collected an average of $14 that year. Many kids improved their reading comprehension, but the reading habit itself was not sustained after the incentive stopped. One clear finding was that the kids had started reading shorter books. So the worry here is that the kids may be picking up the wrong lesson, that a well-meaning incentive may actually be undermining the value we are trying to create, namely the love of reading, which is not something that money can really create. It's more likely to develop through the work of diligent parents and good teachers, and when kids begin to pursue reading as its own reward. So let's take another example of donating blood. It's usually a volunteer system where donors act out of an obligation to their fellow humans. Many donors feel joy in knowing they have saved someone's life. Of course, the volunteer model is not efficient. It requires periodic blood collection drives, and it's often challenging to have the blood banks well stocked. So another scheme was devised in the US. Why not pay donors and use the efficiency of the market to collect blood? What do you think happened? The payment model actually performed worse. It led to more chronic shortages and more contaminated blood. Why? Because by turning an altruistic activity into a commercial transaction, the sense of obligation people felt to others was reduced. Received blood now was not a gift from a fellow human, but an item purchased for $50. So the voluntary donors dried up. In their place came those who needed the money, including drug addicts and the very poor. In short, the market in blood exploited the weak and the poor and drove out a social value that is inherently good for civilized life. Final example, microfinance. Once a hugely successful model, now in trouble. What was different earlier? Well, Muhammad Yunus developed microfinancing in the 70s. He set up the Grameen Bank, which loaned money mostly to women for income-generating activities. The model, however, partly relied on donors and government subsidies, but the model's success at reducing poverty attracted a lot of donors. It was working well and the repayment rates were high. But then some folks, including the World Bank and USAID, thought the model could be made self-sustaining and would scale better if it was commercialized. Soon, for-profit institutions entered the microfinance space. They raised venture capital and even went IPO. Over time, they made loans recklessly for consumer goods. Repayment fell, debts increased, Average interest rates rose to 25-30%. Coercive collection practices became the norm, and many defaulters began committing suicide. In hindsight, commercializing was the wrong move. Market values turned out to be not only less effective, they corrupted and crowded out the social value of poverty reduction that once lay at the heart of microfinance. What these examples illustrate is that the market is not a value-neutral science. In the blood donor example, the market put a price tag on an altruistic activity and in doing so, transformed that activity. Even if we are able to fill our blood banks by paying donors, it is still always important to consider the full social cost of using market values, so we can weigh it against the benefits. Who then decides how much market thinking is appropriate? Market values may well corrode our social values, but to some, that may be an acceptable price to pay. So who decides? The answer is we do, through a more vigorous public debate. We need to ask, do the means correspond with the desired end? Are there some things that money can buy but shouldn't? At the heart of such exploration lies the question, what is the meaning of the good life? If we let the market answer that for us, we would have moved from using a market economy to becoming a market society. Is that our conception of the good life?